I never thought I'd be the guy to get blindsided like this, but here we are. My wife Lisa and I had been married for 8 years, and honestly I thought we had a pretty solid relationship, at least on the surface. We'd gone through deployments, family support meetings, the usual military life stress, and somehow I always believed we were in this together. I was stationed overseas for a year during her last deployment, and I thought that was tough enough. Long nights, constant worry, missing out on birthdays, anniversaries, the little things that keep a marriage alive. But I never suspected that while I was fighting to keep my head down half a world away, Lisa was busy screwing around with a guy who was supposed to be just a pastor, a chaplain at her support meetings. It started with little things, honestly. She'd be more irritable than usual, snapping at me over dumb stuff, like I'd asked her to pick up milk and she'd roll her eyes and say she was so busy or not her job. I figured she was stressed or maybe just tired from all the bullshit that comes with military life. But then I started noticing her phone more often. She'd hide it when I entered the room, and her responses to texts seemed vague, hurried. When I'd ask her who she was texting, she'd brush it off, say it was just some friend from her unit or the support group. Still, I let it slide. I was busy too with my deployments and the stress of being away from home. I told myself maybe she was just anxious, maybe she was overwhelmed, and I tried to focus on the fact that we'd get through it. But then I saw her phone one night when she forgot to hide it. I was in the kitchen grabbing a beer and she was sitting on the couch scrolling through her messages. I caught a glimpse of a text from someone named Chappie that said, "Can't wait to see you tonight. It's been too long." My stomach dropped. I froze, staring at the screen. I mean, I knew she was talking to someone, but I didn't expect it to be a guy from her support meetings, especially not her chaplain. I remember feeling this cold rush of anger and betrayal because I knew, without a doubt, that she'd been lying. When I asked her about it, she just shrugged and said it was nothing and that I was overreacting. She called me paranoid, said I was jealous, and then she threw in some classic line, "You're lucky I even talk to you sometimes." That was her way of dismissing my concerns like they were stupid. I didn't say much that night, but I couldn't get the image out of my head. The next day, I started digging. I checked her messages when she wasn't around, looked at her social media, and I found more signs. Late-night calls, secretive texts, and even a few times where she'd leave the house for support meetings and come back looking flushed, like she'd been somewhere she shouldn't have. My mind kept racing. I couldn't believe it. The woman I loved, the woman I'd trusted, was cheating on me with a guy who was supposed to be helping her cope with her own stress. It felt like my entire world was crashing down. I kept asking myself how I missed it, how I didn't see the signs earlier, even though deep down I think I knew. The way she'd been acting, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd get defensive when I'd ask about her day, that was all supposed to be normal stress, right? But now I realize it was something else, something worse. I kept wondering how long this had been going on. Weeks, months. The thought that she'd been sneaking around with someone who was supposed to be a spiritual counselor but was really just a guy she met at those family support meetings, it made me sick. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to think, to process what this meant. But inside, I was furious. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, like I'd been betrayed by the woman I trusted most in this world. She always called herself strong, independent, and not the kind to cheat, but here we were. I knew I had to face her, but I didn't know how to do it without losing my mind. I'd been away, missing her, trying to be the good soldier, and now I was sitting here, knowing she'd been lying to me all along. How could she do this? What the hell was I supposed to do now? The moment I decided to confront her, I knew I had to be careful. I didn't want to blow up everything without knowing the full story, but at the same time I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see what was right in front of me. That night I waited until she went to bed, then I grabbed her phone again just to see if I'd missed anything. I knew I shouldn't be snooping, but I couldn't help it. My head was spinning with questions and I needed answers. I scrolled through her messages and sure enough there was more evidence. There were texts from Chappie, talking about meeting up, about sneaking around, and even explicit messages about what they'd do when no one was watching. It made me sick to read it all. I saw photos of her and him, both smiling like they were just friends, but I knew better. I could see the way she looked at her phone like she was hiding something precious, something she didn't want me to see. It was like a punch to the gut every time I looked at those texts and images. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept racing, replaying everything I'd found. I kept asking myself how deep this went, whether it was just a fling or something more serious. The thought that she'd been lying all this time, pretending everything was fine, while secretly sleeping with a man who was supposed to be just a spiritual counselor, it broke something inside me. How could she do this? To me, to our marriage. I felt this mixture of rage, heartbreak, and disappointment, all swirling around like a storm I couldn't escape. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. When she woke up, I sat her down at the kitchen table. I was trembling but knew I had to get this out in the open. I told her I knew about the messages, about her secret stuff, and I wanted to hear her explanation. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She looked surprised, then irritated, then defensive. She spat out some lies, saying I was crazy, that I was imagining things, that I was just jealous or insecure because I'd been gone so long. She called me paranoid and accused me of spying on her. Her tone was bitchy, dismissive, like I was the one overreacting. I just stared at her and felt a deep, painful anger boiling over. How dare she call me paranoid? How dare she act like I was the one at fault here? I told her I wasn't stupid, that I knew what she was doing and that I didn't want to hear her lies anymore. At that moment, I realized I was done playing nice. I felt the adrenaline kick in, the need to do something about it. I told her I was leaving for a bit to clear my head, but I knew I wouldn't be coming back that day. As I packed a bag, she kept throwing her words at me, more lies, more denials, more dismissiveness. She called me clingy, said I was overreacting because I was insecure or maybe just jealous of the chaplain. That's when I saw the true face of Lisa, the bitchy, manipulative side she'd been hiding. She didn't care about me or the marriage. She cared about covering her ass and keeping her secret. I left that morning feeling like I'd been punched in the gut but also somehow liberated. Part of me wanted to scream, to break everything, to make her feel just a fraction of the pain I was feeling, but I knew I had to hold it together at least until I figured out what to do next. I couldn't believe I'd been played for a fool all these years. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, had been betraying me behind my back with a guy I'd trusted her to stay away from. And the worst part, she was lying her ass off, spinning stories, pretending she was the victim. That's what cut the deepest, her ability to lie so convincingly, to make me doubt everything we'd built. Now I was alone, angry, hurt, and trying to figure out how I was going to get through this. I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I needed to come up with a plan, a way to make her realize she couldn't cheat and lie without consequences. But right now, all I could do was sit in my car and wonder how everything fell apart so fast, how I missed all the signs, and whether I could ever trust her again. After that morning, everything changed. I spent the next couple of days just wandering around, trying to piece together what I'd found and what I was going to do. I couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation, like I'd been some naive fool who believed in fairy tales. Lisa, of course, kept texting me, trying to play it off like it was no big deal. She was still calling me paranoid, still insisting that I was imagining things or overreacting because of my deployment stress. Honestly, her words just fueled my rage. She's always been good at spinning stories, making herself look innocent, while I was left holding the bag of her lies. The real turning point came when I started talking to some of her friends. I didn't want to make a scene or run to her family, but I needed to understand just how far gone she was. I reached out to one of her close friends, a girl named Emily, who's been married to her husband for about the same time we've been married. I kept my tone calm and explained I needed her advice. That's when Emily told me she'd seen Lisa at the last support meeting, more than once, acting secretive, sneaking off with some guy, and she'd even overheard Lisa talking on the phone, whispering, "Don't worry, I'll see you tonight." Emily's words hit me like a punch in the gut. I told Emily I'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made things worse. I asked if she knew anything about the guy Chappie or whatever his real name was. Emily hesitated, then told me Lisa had been bragging about how special Chappie was, how he understood her in ways I never could, and that she'd been getting her needs met with him. Hearing that, I felt like I'd been sucker punched again. My wife was out there, actively lying and cheating, and her so-called support meetings turned out to be just an excuse for her to meet this guy. It was clear I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I needed to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I was angry, yes, and deeply hurt, but I also knew I had to be smart. I couldn't just storm in and yell or accuse her without proof. That's when I started thinking about my options, how to catch her in the act, how to make her realize I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. I decided I'd rig a little trap. I got my hands on her phone again and set up a special message thread with a fake account I created, pretending to be a guy interested in her. I figured that if she was really cheating, she'd try to hook up with this guy, and I'd be there to catch her. I spent the next day watching and waiting. I kept her phone on me, and sure enough, she started texting back. It was classic, flirty, suggestive, and desperate for her to meet up. I saw her agree to see him tonight, and she even made plans to sneak out of the house. That was the moment I knew I had enough evidence to confront her with cold, hard proof. She'd been lying to my face, pretending she was innocent, but she was actively planning her secret meetup. It's a sick feeling, realizing someone you trusted so blindly can be so manipulative. That night, I stayed close, calmly waiting for her to leave, and then I checked her phone again. The messages were clear, a full-blown affair, not just some fling. I couldn't believe she'd been hiding this whole time, behind my back while I was deployed, while I was dealing with everything over there. She'd been sleeping with her chaplain, a guy she once called a good listener, but who was really just a guy she used to get her kicks. I felt this surge of rage, but also a strange sense of relief. Finally, I had the evidence and I wasn't imagining things. When she left that night, I followed her at a distance, making sure she didn't see me. I parked a few blocks away and watched her walk into a cheap motel. That's when I knew I had to act fast. The next morning, I called her from an unknown number, pretending to be some guy who'd seen her the night before, and I told her I knew everything. Her reaction was instant, defensive, bitchy, full of excuses. She played the victim, said she was just drunk, or she was confused, and that I was crazy for accusing her. That's when I finally snapped and laid it all out, proof, texts, everything. Her face twisted in that moment like she'd been caught in a trap, because she had been. I could see her trying to lie her way out, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her she could keep spinning her stories, but I wasn't going to stay with someone who'd betrayed me this badly. I told her I was done and I was going to leave her. I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief because I finally knew the truth, heartbreak because I loved that woman, and now that love was crumbling right in front of me. Some part of me still wanted to believe it could be fixed, but I knew in my gut that trust was gone for good. The betrayal ran too deep, and I had to protect myself from her lies and manipulations. The pain was real, but I also knew this was the start of a new chapter, one where I'd never let myself be played again. The fallout from that confrontation was immediate and brutal. I packed my bags that morning, feeling like I was walking through a fog of betrayal. Every step I took felt heavy, like I was dragging the weight of her lies behind me. I didn't even bother to say goodbye. What was the point? She sat on the couch, tears streaming down her face, but I saw right through her. Crocodile tears. That bitch was playing her role well, acting all innocent and heartbroken like she was the victim. But I knew better. I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. As I left the house, I remember feeling a strange mix of anger, sadness, and a kind of numbness. It was like my entire world had just collapsed, but I also felt this strange sense of relief. I'd finally uncovered her lies, and I could finally see her for what she really was. For years, I'd been blind to her manipulations, and now I was finally free from her web of bullshit. The drive away from that house was quiet, just me and my thoughts. I kept replaying everything, the secret texts, the sneaking around, the way she'd lied to my face, all to cover her own ass. Over the next few days, I started making arrangements. I contacted a lawyer, looked into what I'd need to do to file for separation. I knew I couldn't go back, at least not right away. The thought of her still being out there with her new chaplain made me sick. I felt used, like I'd been a fool all these years. I kept thinking about all the times I was deployed, missing her, thinking she was just stressed or busy. Turns out she'd been cheating on me during the whole damn time. It was a brutal reality check, realizing I'd been played for a damn fool. But even with all that anger, I also felt something else: disappointment. Deep, aching disappointment that the woman I thought I knew, the woman I fought so hard to protect and love, had turned out to be so different. Somewhere along the way, she had become someone I barely recognized. She'd lied, manipulated, and betrayed everything we built. And for what? Some fleeting sex with her chaplain. I couldn't understand her reasoning. How did she justify that? How could she look herself in the mirror after all the lies? Honestly, I still wrestle with those questions every day. The betrayal cut so deep, it's like I lost a part of myself that I'll never get back. In the days that followed, I kept my distance from her. I didn't want to get drawn into her manipulative games. I blocked her on my phone, cut ties on social media, and began focusing on rebuilding myself. It's shocking how much you realize you took for granted, small things like trust, honesty, and loyalty. I started leaning on some friends, talking it out, trying to make sense of what had happened. Still, a part of me felt hollow, like I'd been sucker punched and left to pick up the pieces. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind to her true nature. The thing that hurt the most was knowing that she'd lied so effortlessly. She convinced herself that her affair was justified, that it was somehow her right to cheat because I was gone so much. That's the thing about betrayal. When someone you love so dearly can lie to your face and then turn around and pretend they're the victim. It's not just about the affair anymore. It's about the fundamental breach of trust. I kept asking myself if she ever really loved me, or if I was just another fool she used to get her kicks. That question will haunt me for a long time. I also started thinking about what's next. I know I have to move on, even though it feels like I'm still stuck in this emotional mess. I've told myself I'll never let someone manipulate me like that again. I'm not perfect, and I know I'll carry scars from this for a long time, but I also know I have to rebuild my life. I can't let her betrayal define me. I have to find a way to trust again, to believe in myself, even if it's just a little at a time. That's the real challenge now: healing, forgiving myself, and figuring out how to go forward without her. Honestly, I keep wondering how she's doing now, probably spinning some story to her friends about how I abandoned her or how I overreacted. She's always been good at lying and twisting the truth to make herself look innocent. But deep down, I think she knows she's the one who screwed everything up. And that's the worst part. Knowing I was played, knowing I was blind, but also knowing I deserve better. I just wish I could go back in time and see the signs sooner, but that's not how life works. All I can do now is move forward, learn from this, and never let someone take me for a fool again. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal stuff, emotional roller coasters, and trying to pick up the pieces of my shattered trust. I moved out of the house into an apartment nearby to keep some semblance of independence. Every morning I'd wake up and feel this gnawing emptiness, knowing she'd been lying right under my nose, sleeping with her chaplain, and convincing herself she was justified. That whole betrayal left me feeling like I'd lost not just a wife, but a part of myself. I kept asking, how could she throw away everything we built for some fleeting sex with a guy who wore a uniform and pretended to be spiritual? It made me angry, but mostly, it just hurt. I talked to a counselor, trying to process all the anger, sadness, and betrayal. The counselor told me it was normal to feel like this, but I still felt like I was walking around with a wound that refused to heal. I'd see her everywhere, her face in my mind, her voice in my head, and I'd get these flashes of the woman I thought I knew. The betrayal was so deep that I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust again. I'd catch myself staring at couples walking by, thinking about what went wrong, whether I was ever enough for her. It's crazy how a good marriage can turn into a nightmare so fast. Honestly, the hardest part was dealing with the aftermath, dealing with her lies, her manipulations, and the fact that she was trying to make me look like the bad guy. She'd call me, crying and begging, saying she was sorry, that she didn't mean for it to happen, that she was just so lost during deployment. But I knew better. I knew she'd been planning her escape for a while. She was good at lies, good at pretending she cared. And even now, I catch myself questioning if I was just blind, if I missed the signs because I loved her so damn much. But deep down, I realize I was just giving her too much slack, ignoring the red flags because I wanted to believe in us. I also started digging into her phone and emails, just to make sure there weren't any surprises left. I found more proof of her ongoing affair, screenshots of their conversations, plans to meet again, and even some explicit photos that she'd sent him when she thought I wasn't looking. That sealed the deal for me. I knew I'd have to go through a divorce, and honestly, it was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. I'd always thought of us as a team, fighting through deployments and life's hardships together. But now I saw her true colors: selfish, manipulative, and utterly unfaithful. Still, amidst all the pain, I tried to focus on my own healing. I threw myself into work, started seeing friends more often, and signed up for therapy sessions. I kept reminding myself that I deserved better. I deserved someone who wouldn't lie and cheat behind my back. The betrayal changed the way I saw everything: trust, love, marriage. I used to think those things were unbreakable, but now I know they're fragile if you don't nurture them. It's a harsh lesson, but one I had to learn the hard way. Every day was a struggle, some days angrier than others, some days just numb. I'd wake up wondering if I'd ever love again or if I'd forever carry the scars of her betrayal. Truthfully, I was scared. Scared I'd never find someone who truly cared, who would betray me the way she did. But I also knew I had to keep moving forward, for myself, for my future, because I refused to let her destroy what little self-esteem I had left. I'd always thought I was a strong person, but this whole thing made me realize that even the strongest can get knocked down. The trick was to get back up, and I was determined to do just that. I won't lie, some nights I lie awake replaying everything, asking myself what I did wrong, whether I could have stopped her or if I was just stupid for trusting her. But the truth is, I did everything I could. I loved her, I supported her, and I believed in us. And that's what hurts the most, knowing she threw it all away. Still, I'm learning to accept that it's over, that I have to forgive myself for trusting her, and that the best thing now is to focus on rebuilding my life from the ground up. The biggest lesson I've learned: never ignore the red flags and never assume someone's fidelity is guaranteed. Because if I had just paid attention earlier, maybe I could have saved myself the heartbreak. But now, I know better. I know I have to be cautious, protect my heart, and not get blinded by love. Because love isn't enough if the other person is secretly tearing you apart. That's a hard truth to swallow, but it's one I'm finally starting to accept. Looking back, I realize that this whole mess has changed me profoundly. I used to trust blindly, believing that love and loyalty were enough to get through anything. Now I see that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, even from someone you once thought was your partner for life. The pain of discovering her affair, especially during a deployment when I was vulnerable and far away, was like having my heart ripped out. But it also forced me to confront the reality that no one can be trusted blindly, not even those closest to you. I've come to understand that sometimes people lie not just because they're bad people, but because they're weak enough to betray, to manipulate, to justify their own selfish needs. Lisa was this person for me. She was the woman I loved, but she turned out to be someone entirely different: selfish, manipulative, and completely dishonest. Her lies were so convincing that for years I didn't see the truth. But once I did, everything else became clear. I learned that you can't ignore the red flags, no matter how much you want to believe in fairy tales. You have to pay attention to the signs, no matter how inconvenient they are. This entire experience has taught me to be more cautious with my trust. I've realized that love isn't just about feelings, but about honesty, respect, and loyalty. If those things are missing, everything else crumbles. I also learned that revenge isn't about petty payback. It's about reclaiming your dignity and standing up for yourself. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted her to see that I wasn't a fool, that I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. That realization gave me a sense of power I hadn't felt in a long time. Now I focus on healing. I've started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I spend more time with my kids, reconnect with old friends, and focus on my own happiness. I've realized that I can still find love again someday, but I'll never forget what I've been through. It's a scar, yes, but it's also a badge of survival. I survived the betrayal and I refuse to let it define me. Instead, I'll use it to be wiser, stronger, and more cautious in the future. There's one thing I want to say to anyone reading this who's going through something similar. Trust me, you're not alone. It hurts like hell and the betrayal feels unbearable at first, but you will get through it. Take time to heal, lean on your friends, and don't be afraid to seek help. Don't blame yourself. Sometimes people just aren't who they pretend to be. Keep your head up even when it feels like everything is falling apart. Because in the end, your worth isn't determined by someone else's lies. It's about how you pick yourself up after the fall. I've learned that the hard way. And now, I'm finally moving forward. The pain will never fully go away, but I've learned to live with it. And I've learned that even after betrayal, life can still be worth fighting for. I owe that to myself, to never let someone else's betrayal destroy my spirit. Because no matter how dark things get, there's always a way back to the light.